Around the year 1200 BC, the Mediterranean world was home to a highly advanced, deeply interconnected network of great empires. In Greece, the Mycenaeans built massive stone palaces. In Anatolia, the Hittite Empire ruled a vast military state. Along the Nile, Egypt was at the peak of its new kingdom power, and in Mesopotamia, Babylon and Assyria controlled wealthy trade routes. These civilizations traded gold, bronze, and luxury goods across thousands of miles, boasting writing systems, complex laws, and mighty armies. And then, in the span of a single generation, almost all of it was destroyed. Cities were burned to the ground, trade routes vanished, writing systems were forgotten, and entire populations fled into the mountains. This was the Bronze Age collapse, the greatest and most sudden civilization collapse in human history. How could a group of thriving empires fall so quickly into a dark age that lasted for centuries? Was it the work of mysterious invaders known as the Sea Peoples, or was it a combination of earthquakes, climate change, famine, and internal rebellion? Today we will dive into the ruins of the ancient world, analyze the archaeological evidence, and reconstruct the perfect storm that brought down the first globalized age. To understand the scale of the collapse, we must first appreciate the golden age that preceded it. The Late Bronze Age was the first truly globalized economy. The defining feature of the era was the bronze industry. Bronze was the super technology of the ancient world, used for weapons, armor, tools, and status symbols. But making bronze required two metals, copper and tin. While copper was relatively common, tin was extremely rare, found in distant places like Cornwall in Britain or the mountains of Afghanistan. This scarcity forced empires to cooperate. They established a complex network of trade routes connecting Greece, Egypt, Mesopotamia, and Anatolia. A clay tablet found in the ruins of Armenia in Egypt shows the kings of these empires addressing each other as brother, exchanging letters, arranging marriages, and trading copper, tin, lapis, lazuli, and silver. This interdependence brought peace and immense wealth, but it also created a fatal vulnerability. If one link in this trade network broke, the entire system would suffer. The empires had become so reliant on international trade that they could no longer survive in isolation. They were, in modern terms, a house of cards waiting for a gust of wind to bring them down. The most famous culprits of the Bronze Age collapse are the Sea Peoples. For decades, historians blamed these mysterious naval invaders for the destruction of the ancient Mediterranean. The primary source of the Sea Peoples come from Egypt. Pharaoh Ramesses III recorded a massive invasion by a collation of foreign tribes, describing them as people of the sea, who had destroyed the Hittite Empire and laid waste to Syria before attacking Egypt. The Egyptian relief carvings show chaotic naval battles, with invaders wearing feather headdresses and carrying round shields. According to the inscriptions, the Sea Peoples were unstoppable, carrying fire and sword across the Levant. Archaeologists have found evidence of a widespread destruction at this time, with cities like Urgate in Syria burned to ash. A final desperate letter from the king of Urgate to the king of Cyprus reads, "My father, behold, the enemy's ships came, my cities were burned, and they did evil things in my country." The letter was found in a kiln, never sent, showing the suddenness of the catastrophe. But who were the Sea Peoples? Modern scholars believe that they were not a single organized army, but a displaced mass of refugees, fleeing their own collapsing homelands in Europe and the western Mediterranean, forced to raid other kingdoms to survive. While the Sea Peoples were the physical agents of destruction, scientists have recently uncovered a deeper, more systematic cause: climate change. Recent studies of pollen samples, cave stalagmites, and lake sediment cores have revealed that the Mediterranean experiences severe, prolonged, dry spells starting around 1200 BC. This was not a temporary drought, but a century-long climate shift that led to widespread crop failures and catastrophic famine. The Hittite Empire in Anatolia, heavily reliant on grain imports, began to starve. Clay tablets contained desperate pleas from the Hittite court for food, with other letters stating, "It is a matter of life or death." Egypt sent shiploads of grain to save their Hittite neighbors, but it was not enough. In Greece, the Mycenaeans faced the same agriculture disaster. As food supplies dwindled, the social contract between the rulers and the ruled shattered. The palace elites, who controlled the economy and claimed to speak to the gods, could no longer feed their people. Starvation led to food riots, peasant rebellions, and the collapse of internal authority, leaving the empires vulnerable to external threats. The Bronze Age collapse is a classic example of a systematic collapse, a domino effect where the failure of one component triggers the collapse of the entire system. When the climate dried up and harvest failed, the tin and copper trade routes broke down. Without tin and copper, bronze could no longer be produced, leaving soldiers without weapons and farmers without tools. As major cities like Rebirth were destroyed, the complex merchant networks vanished, depriving other empires of their tax revenues. The Mycenaean palaces in Greece, which functioned as highly centralized redistribution centers, found themselves with nothing to distribute. The peasants, realizing the palaces could no longer protect or feed them, revolted, burning the administrative centers at the ground. The Hittite Empire, weakened by civil war, famine, and invasion, simply disintegrated. Egypt, though it successfully repelled the Sea Peoples, was so depleted by the effort that it fell into a long period of decline and political fragmentation. The empires had built a system so complex and interdependent that when one pillar crumbled, the entire structure collapsed under its own weight. The aftermath of the collapse was a dark age that lasted for nearly 400 years. In Greece, the change was absolute. The grand palaces of Mycenaean, Tyrants, and Pylos was abandoned and never rebuilt. The writing system, known as Linear B, disappeared entirely, leaving the Greeks illiterate for centuries. The population plummeted, and the art of monumental stone architecture was forgotten. People lived in small, isolated villages, surviving on basic agriculture. The Hittite Empire vanished so completely from history that its existence was only rediscovered in the 19th century. The great trade networks that had connected the Baltic, the British Isles, and the Near East was replaced by localized, isolated economies. It was a period of silence, where the historical record went blank. But this dark age was not just a period of decay. It was also a reset button. Out of the ashes of the old world, a new era was born. The destruction of the Bronze Age empires cleared the way for new technologies and civilizations to emerge. The most significant shift was the transition from bronze to iron. Unlike bronze, which required long-distance trade to obtain copper and tin, iron ore was abundant and could be found locally in almost every region. The technology of smelting iron, developed in Anatolia, spread rapidly during the Dark Age. The abundance of iron democratized warfare and agriculture, making tools and weapons available to common people, not just wealthy elites. In the vacuum left by the fallen giants, new players stepped onto the stage. The Phoenicians, free from Egyptian and Haitian control, established a maritime trading empire that spread their Photonic alphabet across the Mediterranean, the ancestors of the alphabet we use today. In Greece, the isolated communities slowly evolved into the democratic city-states of Athens and Sparta. In the Levant, the kingdoms of Israel and Judah emerged. The Bronze Age collapse was a catastrophe, but it was also a necessary disruption that allowed the modern world to begin. The Bronze Age collapse is a powerful warning from the deep past. It shows us that progress is not a one-way street, and that highly advanced, globalized civilizations can fall if their systematic vulnerabilities are exposed. Today, we live in a world more interconnected than ever before, relying on global supply chains, international trade, and fragile technologies. The story of 1200 BC reminds us that when crisis strikes, resilience is just as important as complexity. If you enjoyed this journey into the ancient past, please hit the subscription button and like button. Tell us in the comments, do you think our modern civilization is vulnerable to a similar collapse? Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next historical deep dive.